I'd like to call the October 26, 2024 Policy Committee meeting to order. And first of all, I'd like to thank all the admin team members and any viewing public for your engagement to provide context and insights for the committee's deliberations. If any of the public wants to share opinions, ideas, help us along, please direct your comments to any one of the committee members. That would be Beverly Washington, Ian Thomas, or myself, Matt Schulman, and we'll all share amongst ourselves. You only need to send one, and we'll share it with Susan as well, of course. Finally, we have a very heavy agenda tonight, so I want everybody to have a chance to speak as much as they want, but to the extent that we can be really well focused and not duplicative, that will move us right along. Our first order of business is review of the minutes for Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Is there anybody who'd like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the minutes of September 24th.
Mr. Thomas, thank you. I'm not sure. I know, I'm not sure if Bev is online yet. Okay, well then I'll second the motion. Schulman seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on any errors, corrections, additions? Then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes of Tuesday, September 24th, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Welcome, Bev. That motion passes 3 in favor, no abstentions, no opposed. We're now moving to new business, a discussion of policy 5145-5 through 4118-112, prohibition of sex discrimination. This policy is necessitated by a change in federal Title IX regulations affecting potential complaints of sex discrimination and or sex-oriented harassment. Susan, would you consider beginning by describing the salient changes in the federal regulations, as well as the CABE and legal resources your staff has drawn upon in preparing the proposed policy?
Yes, I have Denise here, who's our Title IX, what do you call it? Coordinator?
Coordinator. Yep.
She wears many hats, as you know. And so if you can orient them, I know you've done a lot of research with this, and Floyd's firm also has a lawyer that works with special education as well. I don't know, I see Ian's hand.
Just a
Please, Ian.
point of privilege, could we project the document? Just to so we can kind of read along.
Do you happen to have yours handy, or I can go look for mine if you want?
Clint, do you have it? Did Joyce give that to you by no chance?
I do not.
I can pull it up. I just wanted to confirm the number. We're on 5145.5.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and start, and I'll just pop it up when I get it handy.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you. So first of all, to the committee, good evening. This model policy and regulations are part of the Title IX toolkit that was provided to the district by our law firm, Burcham and Moses. And the first change that I want to bring to your attention, will actually, the new regulations went into effect on August 1st, 2024. And the first change is actually a change in terminology. The definition from the federal regulations, as Matthew just stated, changed from sexual harassment to sex-based harassment. And you'll see in the policy that the policy also includes gender identity. So if
these are the say that this is the transgender one that we've already voted on, Clint, but thank you anyway for trying.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the policy prohibits sex discrimination based on sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy and related conditions, sexual orientation, and gender identity. That gender identity is new to the definition with these regulations. We do have in the policy just a name and a phone number, so that if the director of special education or pupil personnel services changes, you don't have to come back to policy to make that change. So we recommend that you just keep the title and the office phone number in there. And then there's information about how to report a complaint. However, all of the forms are included in the Title IX toolkit that we have tonight. And then the last paragraph just really refers to the fact that this is the procedure that will be in place for any complaints as of August 1st, 2024 and moving forward.
Denise, can I just stop you for a minute? This is 5145.5 and also related to 4118.112. Was this, it's all in green. Is this the new one or the old one?
This is the new one. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because we're
Because-
going with Bertram Moses's policy and regulations, you'll see everything is in green.
Okay.
So everything is proposed new. I mean, there are some
So instead of K,
similarities.
we used Floyd's organization for this one.
Correct. And there
And
are
you had
some,
worked with Michelle Lobbin, I believe, who's from his firm.
actually Carolyn Dugas and Rebecca Goldberg are the
Okay.
two attorneys in the firm that specialize in sex-based discrimination.
Mhm.
There are some similarities to the previous policy and regulations, which I can point out as we go. But I just wanted to highlight those general changes in the policy that you see in front of you right now. And that's it for the policy. Any questions?
Now,
on
were
the
there
policy?
regulations that went with it? Because I see the policy is short and concise. It's just one page.
Yes, the regulations are quite lengthy. They are 10 pages.
Wow.
Matthew, do you want me to go on to the policy or the regulations?
Well, let's chat, let's see if there's any conversation about the policy first.
Okay.
And maybe we can be fluid. So, but
Sounds
does
good.
anybody have any comments on the policy at this point?
No comments, just wanted to confirm that this is the correct one that's up on the screen.
Yes, it is.
Because we
Okay.
did get one that was all blocked in and it said document at the top.
Okay.
And it was dated 10/18. And it was many more pages, but I don't know where it came from.
So that is
So
our current policy,
Oh, that's the current one?
right?
Oh, okay.
That was the current policy that's posted on our website under the BOE policies. and
Okay, got it.
regulations.
And there's lots of pages on that one.
Yes, so I was just matching for consistency purposes for
Yeah.
the entire agenda. I was
Mhm.
making sure that for each of the A through K, if we had it available, that people could see the existing board policy and regulations. Because we only had originally pulled B through J. So for
Right.
consistency purposes, I just want to make sure everybody had the same information.
Thank you, Irene.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And then the major changes in here, just remind us again that they've added the,
Sure, they've changed the
Gender.
terminology. So instead of sexual harassment, we're now using the term sex-based harassment or sex discrimination. The definition now includes gender, gender identity and sexual, or I think sexual orientation was always there. Gender identity is new. And then
have
I
they
think-
always had pregnancy and related conditions on there?
I believe they've always had pregnancy. I
Mhm.
believe I'd have to check, but pregnancy definitely is a little bit more defined in terms of the regulations that you'll see when we get into the regulations in terms of accommodations for specifically for lactation, for
Oh.
special rooms for students for lactation,
Mhm.
and to provide students who are pregnant with alternate courses if they're available for other students.
Right.
Denise, do we ever have pregnant students in our district?
We do.
And what do you do
yes.
now?
Generally, they receive homebound tutoring. If they're not, if they don't want to attend school during their pregnancy, and especially during their maternity, after they deliver and they're at home with the
Mhm.
baby. So generally, the services are provided through our online learning program, Apex, with a homebound tutor.
Now, do any of the females come back to school after they deliver their babies?
Yes, it depends
Okay.
on childcare. Some
Okay.
have had a lot of support from parents to watch the baby so they can come back to school.
Do you have a plan how you're gonna give them a place for lactation?
I think that could easily be worked out with, the high school administration. We do have a Zen room at the high school in the guidance office, and there's also an extra spot in the guidance office where we have some students that are doing some remote instruction for dyslexia. So there is a
Mhm.
spot in the guidance office. I'd have to really, have more information in terms of whether they would need, running water. So maybe it could be in the nurse's
Right.
office. I don't think we have a designated spot now, but I think if we had to create one, we certainly could.
Okay, good.
And I
Okay.
think every school has had to, Beverly, because we've got a lot of young teachers who've had babies recently.
Yes.
So every school has had this situation. Even
Even
at central
central
office,
office.
we've had it.
Yeah.
So we've always made sure that little kind of closet room in back of where the superintendent used to be. I'm across the hall now. The
Yes.
assistant superintendent's in there. So we've used that with a shade. And that's been a space at central office when we've needed it. So we can certainly do the same thing with our students.
Okay. Is this all state law, Denise, or
I believe
not?
it's federal. Yep, federal law.
Federal law? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yep,
All right. Thank you, Denise.
sure.
So I just have to add this one little vignette. At Norwich Free Academy years ago, my good friend's mom, Janet Barnett, who just recently passed at 90 years old, created a program for early childhood and for pregnant moms. And the program was to educate the mothers, but also for them to be able to bring the babies to school and learn, all the things from infancy to early childhood. And the program was renowned and she was known for it. And at her funeral just last weekend, lots of those people, lots of those young girls came and said how Mrs. Barnett changed their life. But it was really quite the program. I feel like that is a missing ingredient in our schools, that whole, early childhood and parenting and some of those courses that used to be really helpful for our young people, kind of life skills.
Yeah, I had heard about that program years ago.
I
So-
think years ago, Susan, New London used to have a program for
Yeah.
pregnant teenagers too.
So I just want to follow up on what Bev brought up as far as this being federal law. And Denise as well. So as federal law, this pretty much supersedes anything that we could write anyway, right?
Correct.
So we basically just have to dot a couple I's, cross a couple T's, get the right information in there that's specific to our district as required, and then this thing just goes right in.
Right. And
Yeah.
of course, Floyd Dugas's firm, his wife actually is the one who's very instrumental. So we know that for certain that they've verified to make sure
Right.
that it has all the main ingredients.
This is already pre-vetted by the attorney.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, and
Yes.
there are some areas, Ian, in terms of the timelines, when we get into the investigation, that we had a little bit of leeway on, and what we did is we went with the recommendation from our attorney's firm to give the district a little bit more flexibility.
Okay. Well, all that being the case, I make a motion that we pass this pass this on to the board for a first read.
That'd be
Awesome.
great. Now, the only other thing I wanted to say in regulations is there are forms. Denise and I, unfortunately, in the past 10 years have had to deal with this kind of thing with her Title IX hat, especially with the adults. And so I just know that there are forms to be filled out if there is a complaint from either a student or another colleague about somebody. And, you know, and she goes through the whole process with investigating, and she's been trained as an investigator, and so have our administrators. So, I think those forms are in regulations, right? Were they the
Yes.
same forms or are they
Yep,
different? Did
no,
they
they're
have to change?
different. I mean, they basically have the same information, but they're formatted on our new letterhead. And they are just new versions to be updated, with the new regulations. But there is a new form, a complaint of sex discrimination, sex-based harassment. And you'll see the only difference here is we used to have a formal complaint and an informal complaint form.
Oh,
The new regulations remove any distinction between formal and informal.
mhm.
There's
So
just
it's
one
just a
complaint form, but
Yeah.
we can follow up in terms of investigating either with a full formal investigation, or we can talk to the complainant and see if they'd feel more comfortable doing an informal resolution, like a restorative justice meeting or something similar to that, based on,
Mhm.
the preference of the complainant. And then there is a notice, there's a letter to the complainant and the respondent. The respondent is the person that's being alleged to have conducted the sex or, done the sex discrimination, committed the
Denise,
sex.
do you have a timeline that you have to respond to these complaints?
Yes, yep. In the
What's-
regulations, I can get to that in one moment.
Okay,
There's also a letter, a notice of dismissal. So if the complaint does not meet the requirements of sex-based discrimination,
thank you.
as the coordinator, I can dismiss the complaint. So it does indicate why the complaint's being dismissed.
Mhm.
There's a number of different reasons. So if the person submitting the complaint cannot identify a respondent or a person that they feel was responsible for the discrimination, obviously we wouldn't be able to investigate that. That would be a reason to dismiss the complaint. If the respondent doesn't participate in any way in a school-sponsored activity, if they weren't, an observer at a sporting event, or obviously a staff or student, we would just withdraw or dismiss the complaint. If the person voluntarily withdrew the allegation, we could dismiss it. Or if we determined that there wasn't enough
Evidence.
information in terms of the allegations provided to determine if the complaint met the legal definition, and if we could prove discrimination, we can dismiss the complaint. And then there's the right to appeal.
And you need to know that in a serious situation where we're, needing some support, we do talk to Floyd's group too, to
Yes.
talk about the case study
Yeah.
and to get guidance from them, because these are people's lives and, we take it really seriously. So,
And then the last letter is a non-disclosure agreement that's commonly known as a confidentiality agreement. And we have used that in cases where either party, the respondent or the complainant, was concerned about their confidentiality or their privacy. So having the official form, I think, goes a long way to help both sides feel as if, this is going to be kept confidential.
And all these forms are new, Denise, or we already
No,
had
we've
forms?
had these before. We have them right now. We've been using them. They're formatted on our new letterhead, and some of the wording is slightly different, but not significantly different.
Okay.
There is a new form, though, actually, to dismiss the complaint. In the past, I've written a letter indicating why the complaint is being dismissed, and now we have a form. So that actually is new. Then in terms of the timeline that Bev had asked just a moment ago, in the regulations, you'll see the first part of the regulations really contain a lot of definitions. The heart, or kind of the middle of the regulation on page 7, really delves into the investigation. And there are quite a few timelines. in the investigation. So on page, if you're looking at them on page 8, so another change in the new regulations is with the old process, both sides, the complainant and the respondent, were allowed to have a copy of any of the evidence that the other party brought forward. And then each party had a certain amount of time that they could review that evidence. It was 10 calendar days. And then they could submit any additional evidence that they would like, the district to consider. That has now changed in terms of each party has access to information, evidence that either party brings forward, but they don't receive a copy. They don't actually get a copy of the actual evidence, but I can summarize it and send it to them, or they can come in and meet with me and the principal and review it. So that's a slightly different change, a slight change. So in terms of the investigation, we have that each party will have equal opportunity to access the evidence. And we provide a reasonable opportunity for them to respond. And then we take reasonable steps to allow each party, to view or to have access to the responses. Witnesses can be questioned. And there's a certain, I don't know why I'm not seeing it in here. There are a certain number of days. Oh, okay. I think, let's see. I'm not finding the days. Oh, here we go. If you look on page 4 of 10, it has within 10 business days after receiving a report of possible discrimination, meaning a complaint, the Title IX coordinator or the designee, it could be a principal, will communicate with the complainant and discuss supportive measures. So supportive measures are not new. And what supportive measures are they are steps that we take to help the complainant and the respondent feel comfortable attending school while this process is being implemented. Sometimes it's a schedule change. Sometimes it's access to a school social worker. Sometimes it's assigned seats on the bus or a change in bus or in the cafeteria. But it usually involves some measures to help those students have some space and feel as if that harassment is going to stop during the investigation.
This is also similar to sometimes when a parent would fill out a bullying form or student, especially in student to student issues. And we're really careful about how, if the other student is bullying, then we might have to take more stringent measures. But if it's something that one child just feels that way and we can't find the evidence, we still want to protect them and make sure that they're feeling comfortable.
That's a great example. So within 10 business days, we would reach out to the complainant, give the complainant the option of filing a complaint, a formal complaint, and then offer supportive measures. We usually do that much sooner. The next timeline is within 10 business days after communicating with the complainant. We will assess whether or not, if the complainant doesn't file a complaint, oftentimes the district has the burden to file a complaint on behalf of the complainant. And that is so that the district is not deliberately indifferent. So if we're made aware, sort of just like Susan said, about a possible sex-based discrimination or a bullying, we're required to file a complaint and to take steps that are needed to make that behavior stop. So that's the next 10 days. And then within 5 days after receiving a complaint, or if I initiate a complaint, I have to evaluate whether or not we're going to conduct an investigation. So sometimes we have to file a complaint, even though we don't have all the information. But once we get the information, then we'll decide if we are moving forward or not. And then Within 60 calendar days after the assignment, this is if the complaint is taken for a formal investigation, we provide the parties access to the evidence or a description of the evidence. And then within 30 calendar days after the assignment of the complaint to the decision maker, a written determination shall be issued. And then if an appeal is filed, the parties have 10 business days after the appeal, the decision is made to file their appeal. So there are some timelines established. We try to get these investigations conducted in more of a timely manner because they are, sometimes it's very sensitive in terms of making sure that the children, the students feel comfortable in school. So that is basically the timelines. The rest of the policy talks about the notice. There is a letter that is sent once a complaint is accepted for a formal investigation. There's a notice that's sent to the complainant, and there's a notice that's sent to the respondent. And it does talk about confidentiality and retaliation being prohibited. And it talks about their opportunity to meet with us and share, any information that they would like. There's information in the complaint or in the policy, the regulations about dismissal that we just talked a little bit about. They do spell out the investigation and how the investigation is conducted. Generally, when we meet with the students, the parents have the option of being present, or we usually have a trusted adult like a guidance counselor present with us. Let's see.
Denise, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Yeah. How many complaints of this nature do you usually get a year?
I'm going to say for formal investigation, like 5 or less. A lot. This right now, we have the option to do an informal complaint, an informal process, and we still have that with the new regulations, but we do have to have a complaint completed. So oftentimes we will go an informal route in terms of having a resolution meeting. Sometimes the students don't want to be in the same room, and that's fine. We'll, meet with each party separately and come up with a resolution. And sometimes, students and parents are happy with that. Other times, I find if the harassment has been going on a long time and the respondent has not changed their behavior despite the complainant, telling them to stop, I find often that's when they really want to go through with a formal, complaint, because they feel like that's the only thing that's going to get the respondent to stop.
And what
this
is the
is also in
respondent?
the 4,000s for personnel too, right? Denise, we didn't bring that
well,
one
that's
forward.
another change. I'm glad you brought that up, Susan. This is really, yes, it's 5145 for students and 4118.12 for staff. So with the old policy, we had separate policies and regulations for students and staff. This is now the same. So it really streamlines the process compared to what we had before.
It's any really 2 individuals, student, staff.
Yeah.
Staff
We
to
also
staff.
had in the regulations with the old procedures that there had to be an investigator and then a decision maker, and they couldn't be the same people. With the new regulations, the investigator and the decision maker can be the same individual. So that does streamline it as well.
Are you happy with all the new changes, Denise? Are you happy with all this?
I am. I'm happy with just having one policy, one regulation for students and staff, one complaint form, and then eliminating all the different, people who were involved in terms of the investigator, and then the decision maker had to be someone different. So I think it does streamline the process a little bit and make it a little bit more efficient.
Denise actually counsels them too. Like there was a situation that we were dealing with, and the parent didn't really want to press any, issues. It was a student to student, but Denise really said it's kind of like a bullying form. You want to, if this is really bothering your child, you need to, then your child has the right to fill in this form. So she helps them along the way.
Mhm,
And then if they don't, then she really is, if
Mhm.
she's feeling like it needs to be investigated, then she is the Title IX. Once she's gotten that information, she can go forward and put together the complaint. Can't you, Denise? Isn't that one of the things that you
Yep.
just recently had to do?
Yep. And then one other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, the definition of hostile environment has changed. With the old regulations, this is the bar for hostile environment. We had to demonstrate that the behavior in question or the conduct in question was subjectively and objectively offensive and is so severe and persuasive that it limits or denies the person's ability to participate in or benefit from the educational program or activity. With the new regulations, they've removed the and it's or.
Yep.
So the new definition is that a hostile environment is created when the unwelcome sex-based conduct in question is subjectively and objectively offensive and is so severe or pervasive. So it does open it a little bit more. It is a lower standard. So it could be severe or pervasive, and it limits or denies the person's ability to participate in their program.
So let
So
me ask a
lower the bar a
question. Let me
little
ask
bit.
a question if I may. Ian had made a motion and we kind of took a long discussion on that, but there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we can go back and have any further discussion now if we want to, but we have a motion that's been made and seconded.
Yeah, no, I'm satisfied with the discussion that's already happened. I believe it's a comprehensive approach and all the updates are all legitimate and backed by federal law. So I think I'm comfortable moving forward to a vote.
Bev, any further comment?
No, not unless Denise has something to add. Anything else we should know about this, Denise? I don't want to rush you through.
No, I'm looking through my notes. No, I think that's it.
Okay. Susan, anything to add before we vote?
No, I think it's ready for the board, and I think Denise does a great job explaining.
Great.
It's really necessary to have this kind of process and
Thank
law.
you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
the only other thing I will add, Matthew, is that we are updating our training. There is required training. This is actually very important for all employees in terms of the new regulations. And we have an attorney, Rebecca Goldberg from the firm, coming on November, I think it's the 21st, to our admin council. We're going to do a meeting from 4 to 6. With Rebecca, with our entire administrative council. She's going to walk them through the changes, and we'll talk about a lot about the investigation process, the definitions, the timelines, the forms, so that they're familiar and they're comfortable moving forward. And then we have a new training for the staff that's on our Safe Schools platform. It's about 46 minutes long. And we're going to work with Anne Marie Mancini to designate one of the TLI days, just, an hour or 45 minutes in a TLI day for the staff to take the new Title IX
That's
training
terrific. That's great.
online.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a test with that training, Denise, or do they just
There
listen to
is
it on
usually,
video?
There's usually you have
quizzes
to answer
embedded.
questions.
Yep, there are quizzes embedded for the staff training on safe schools. And it will have everyone take that, probably the administrators as well, because we'll set aside time for everyone in the district to take it during a TLI day.
Thank you,
Terrific.
Denise.
Okay, having, I guess I read Chris, no, okay. Having discussed it, all those who are in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
So if I understand correctly, we have 3 in favor, none opposed, no abstain. The motion is carried, and we will send this to the Board of Education regular meeting for first reading this month.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Denise. I
everyone.
really
Denise.
appreciate it.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
have a good
I'm glad you
evening.
got home for the
You too,
remote.
Denise.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great job as always, Denise.
Thank you, Beverly.
She's very thorough,
Good night.
She sure is.
and she needs to be a job like that, right?
Okay, so we're going to move on. Our second agenda item are the referrals from the ad hoc committee. These are policies that are related to recommendations referred to this committee by the Ad Hoc Budget Procedure Committee, designed to improve the functionality and transparency of the district's budget formulation process and board oversight of such process and operations. They include quite a few policies. We have 6 of the 9 that are on the list on the agenda we will be dealing with, though not all today. However, 2 of the items, policies 3310 and 3320, based on advice that we got from Irene, these transfer of funds and procedure and purchasing guidelines and purchasing procedures will be pulled for now and will be coming back to us as part of a comprehensive procurement policy. And I guess Irene will let us know as she moves towards that point. So we're going to table, I don't know, table them or drop them. Not quite sure how to handle it procedurally, but we're going to go in the others. The first
I
one,
think we're gonna handle them later at a later date, but we're gonna prioritize these
yes.
for the budget process.
Right.
So-
And Matthew, if you table them, that just means that you can bring them up at a future meeting.
Okay, then can I have a motion to table from somebody? Well,
Yeah.
I'll make a motion. Go ahead,
So,
Ian.
Sorry, I'll make a motion to table, hold on a second.
It's 3310 and 3320.
Yeah, I'll make a
And-
motion to table, discussion on policy P 3310, 3320, and 3160, and 3200.
Sounds like you got them all. Irene, did you get them all?
That would be these.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that leaves us with 5 to discuss. I would suggest starting with the 3110 budget planning, but if somebody has strong feelings that they want to do something else first, please speak up.
I think the numerical order made sense. I think Ian mentioned that at the other meeting because it kind of flows better with the
Yeah.
process.
I'm good with that.
So 3310, what we didn't have earlier were the CABE model
Right.
policies. And nor did we have, when this was first sent out, the benefit of yesterday's discussion.
Right.
So I made a pass today on several of these to try to restate the policy as written by Ian's committee, incorporating elements from the CABE sample policy, while trying as very best I can to remain faithful to the structure intent of the ad hoc committee. Any personal comments I have would be later. Ian, if you would prefer to go with what you submitted initially, that's okay with me too. We had chatted earlier, Ian and I, but I can put up the revised P3110 if you prefer, or Ian, what's your pleasure?
Well, now I've had a little bit of time to reflect on it since we talked on the phone, and to be honest, I'd rather just kind of go straight at the ones that were, submitted as part of the report, and we can incorporate the changes from CABE as we go. I
Okay.
think maybe that's a better way to go. just for
As you wish.
continuity. So let me just do this and then do this. All right. So, can everyone see policy P3110 as a
Is
word?
there any way to blow that up to help the old folks?
I
like
actually
me?
have mine on paper, so I can see it quite well.
Let me know how much larger you need. How's that?
That's fine. That's fine.
All right. So yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to review the CABE, corresponding CABE policy on this, so I'm fine with just kind of handling it as we go. So if someone else has versed themselves in the CABE, then just, feel free
Well,
to.
Cabe had an opening paragraph, an introductory paragraph that I felt would be useful at the top of what we have. But I will trust your judgment as to whether you want to hear that now or later.
Well, it kind of correlates with the top portion of the old policy in black as a preliminary part of the development of the budget, yada, yada, yada. In ours and in the CABE revised, that really correlates with the latest legislation. It says the Board of Ed shall prepare an annual operating budget for the school district consistent with provisions of state statutes and Board of Finance requirements governing preparation, timelines, and available appeal processes of reduction. So it's just got more of a legal stance and certainly a framework that kind of introduces the process.
The only thing I was wondering about, Susan, was that Board of Finance, because we don't have a Board of Finance.
Yeah, we'd have to change it. We'd have to tweak it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm not opposed to putting that as a beginning paragraph.
and then I liked it because then it moved from the general opening statement to an establishing budget priorities, which we are talking about in this one, but it's just more cohesive and it doesn't have some of the green language is more regulations that we can look at in regulations, but they really keep separate the policy from the regulations, which we've been trying to do more of. So, so it talks about the board assessing what the priorities are, like we're doing when we go to the schools to say, what are your needs? When we do zero-based budgeting. And then there's a section on supplemental appropriations. And since one of the laws, 10.222, is appropriations and budget, financial information systems, I think it's pretty important to have a section on supplemental appropriations. But Irene's really the expert on this. So I'm just reading it aloud and seeing how it compares. So I don't know if Irene wants to say anything about that.
Sure, I agree with Susan. It's about the middle of the paragraph when it starts getting into the procedure. That is more under Susan's direction as a superintendent, that the procedure is how we're going to work through this internally. And we can come forward and make a recommendation with a regulation for consideration. But I do believe the CABE recommendation gets to what the board's looking to do with the budget planning.
So, Irene, you and Susan prefer the CABE policy as opposed to the ad hoc committee's policy?
In certain circumstances, yes, because we're adding in the procedure, which is a regulation. So it's not something the board can dictate and put in a policy saying this is the procedure you're going to follow, because we may learn of a new best practice that will change the procedure. And if we have procedures mixed with policy, then every time we change an internal procedure, we're going to need to come back and revise policies.
Right. Well,
is there anything in the ad hoc committee policy that you can put into the CABE policy, or no?
That
I think it's just different language, like as a preliminary part of the development. That's what we had used before in the old language.
Yeah.
And this
All
one
right.
comes out with the Board of Education shall prepare an annual operating budget, because it really does put the responsibility, on the board that we have to get this done.
Okay,
I think that's
thank
stronger
you.
language actually for the board.
Well,
Well, so if I it's gonna respond there just quickly, the way I'm reading this, the procedure that's mentioned, the second part here, that's a general broad-based thing that is just talking about developed in conjunction with the superintendent of schools. And notice most of that is black ink. That's pre-existing policy, for one. Two, again, policy leads to procedure and then that leads to regulation. So, it would have been great to get the CABE,
That's
as a
typically
separate piece so
that's
we get-
typically how we do it, Ian, is we look at the old policy, we look at CABE, or we get legal advice in preparing it. And so anytime you need that, Erica's great at pulling that, and it's actually online too. So you can go on to CABE's website. But I just like the way that they broke it into the three parts. They gave you a general area and then establishing those priorities, which I think is important. You talk about that in your document,
but that was a question I had, Susan. And my notes I wrote, why isn't the part of establishing budget priorities taken out of this one and put into 3313, which is the it's called preparation of budget document. It would seem to me that establishing the budget priorities would fit more neatly there.
Well, I think it could go both places. Actually, when you're talking about the budget planning, you need to have those priorities when you're planning. So it can go both places in the document or in the planning. I mean, you need it kind of both places.
Well, part of what I heard over the last 8 or 9 months was a desire, and please, I invite anybody to chime in, was a desire of the board to be more actively involved earlier on. And rather than coming at the point where a budget is presented to us and we're then questioning this item and that item and how it got there and whether it's a priority or not. And we eat up an awful lot of time doing something that we could do a lot earlier by getting involved earlier. And
well, I think that's what the CABE policy is doing. It's really putting it in the driver's seat of the board with, of course, the superintendent and staff. But
and that's what we had the timeline too.
Yeah.
That too appears in policy 3133, which does not mean it can't appear elsewhere.
I mean, I can see that a procedure is like a regulation that could go in a regulation and we could work through that. But I think we got to get the policy first and then you do the regs.
And I would just recommend that we create one budget policy document that has the subsections that include the budget planning that moves all the way through. So we're collapsing probably 7 budget related policies into one overall BOE budget policy that would follow the CABE recommendation and then tweak for our public school system in our district.
Have you seen that done before, Irene?
It was very common in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and as well as Michigan. I would have to see if there's something in Connecticut that doesn't allow that to happen. But basically, when you adopt that overall structure, you include the planning process. You include, not the process itself, but here's the budget planning. We agree we're going to deliver a timeline and adopt a timeline by X, supplemental appropriations, use of one-time revenue sources or non-lapsing. You can collapse that into one. And that way, if there's changes to law, anything that we would have as an appendix when it starts getting into specific numbers. So that way, if the law changes, you're not necessarily changing your entire policy, you're changing an appendix.
But do you see that the policies that have been brought forth, they all could be cohesive, you know,
Right.
and the way they are organized, they do kind of go in order.
Right.
So at this point, we can look at that and then find
Mhm.
out through CASBO if there's a way that it's done.
Sure.
Right,
kind
so-
So my question is, and I see, Irene, the logic of what you're suggesting. And yet the history is in front of us that that's not been the way it's been done, that at least through CABE's way of policies, they have a bunch of separate policies.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure I understand the rationale for it, but I don't think that was a haphazard decision. Somebody must have considered having a single policy and decided that it was just too complicated and cumbersome to do and that they needed to have separate policies. That I'm making as a hypothesis. It's not a statement of fact.
I'll follow up with CASBO to see if there's other communities that are doing one budget policy instead of separate policies. It could be specific to Connecticut that I'm not aware of yet.
But I think that these separate policies are definitely the main ingredients of
Right.
even
Right,
if
I
we had
agree.
one.
Right,
So
well,
I
either
think working through
way,
this is important.
either way, like the subsections, if these develop as independent policies or as subsections to a broader
Mhm.
umbrella policy, that is, you know, that's not, we still have to deal with these component parts.
Right.
And, you know, it has existed as they are. So, you know, I think we should proceed with as far as getting the language that we want in these documents. And it sounds to me that you know, there is some merging that could occur here with the CABE documents. I would,
Could we put up the other one that I've done and take a look at that? See
yeah,
how
sure.
feel
Can you
about it?
share your screen? I'll stop sharing this one.
I can do that.
Do you
tell
have
me.
independent documents? Are they separate?
The separate documents. I'm just going to put up 3110.
Okay.
Take
Alright.
that down and I'll go. 3110. Share. Okay, what is missing on this is that paragraph on supplemental appropriations, which would need to be on the bottom. Again, this is my attempt to try to remain faithful to the committee and tighten up the language and integrate the CABE sample policy. So the first paragraph is virtually from CABE. The only change is I took out the business of Board of Finance and put it in its place, the town's charter.
Thank you. That's good work.
Okay, and the fourth paragraph, which does not show there, would be the CABE paragraph on supplemental appropriations.
Mhm.
So really what we're talking about is the utility or lack of utility of considering these middle two paragraphs as fairly representing what Ian's committee did. Then we can talk about if that fairly represents what he wanted to accomplish, then we can talk about how we might want to tweak it. That seemed to me be a logical approach. What do you all think?
You know, now rereading this, I'm okay with what you have, with your interpretation here. But I would also want to invite Jen to comment.
Absolutely.
Have her present.
And Bev.
Of course, Bev, as part of the committee.
Did you want to put anything about the priorities? Because that's always essential. Do you have that in there and I'm just not seeing it?
That's later. That's later. That's in another one.
3113.
What do you mean later?
Yeah.
In the budget document?
No, 3113. P3113 is the priorities, I believe.
Okay, it's got its own?
Yes.
Okay.
So Matthew, I would just recommend that in the first paragraph, when we say it's consistent with provision of state statutes, that before state, we put federal, comma, state. and
Absolutely.
charter,
Absolutely.
because we don't need to lose any federal funding.
Absolutely.
Irene's gonna
And I
make
think
sure of
we
that
can-
with those grants, that we're doing
Exactly.
it the right way.
Nobody caught that I said state statutes. We'll put in the T and turn them into statutes.
Oh, that would help.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing this, Ian, on your side?
Well, I don't have your document, so I am just making.
Okay, I'll refine it later. No problem.
Yeah, but honestly, if you email me a copy of your Word doc, I can build from there, with the notes here.
I can't do that while that's on the screen. I'll have to send it to you.
No,
later.
no,
So
that'd be
did we capture everything from the CABE document that you want in here, except for the supplemental appropriations?
Yeah, and what I'm talking about would include the supplemental appropriations.
Okay. Because
Where-
that's
where is
actually one of
that?
the laws that it's referred to as.
That's in the CABE
appropriations.
sample document, Bev. And
Yeah, I had that. Where's that in your document?
He
it's
hasn't
not,
put
I
it in yet.
didn't type it in. I thought to put
Okay.
it somewhere else, but I've been shown
Okay.
the error
So-
of my ways.
Okay, so I'm not opposed to Matthew's document if Susan and Irene are fine with it and adding in the supplemental appropriations.
I just would say that that last sentence in the middle paragraph, the board actually works with the superintendent, and the superintendent works with the staff. And if we want to get into, family engagement and others, that becomes a regulation. So I think
Right.
that we have to be very careful with
I
that
thought that
last
too.
piece of language, because we
Yeah.
might not do survey every year, and I don't want to be
Yeah.
bound to it by law.
And that's would circle back to the committee's draft, where we did say, in conjunction with the superintendent, as the main point of contact. So
I was
Right.
wondering how you felt about that, Susan.
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
come to the table, but we've worked behind the scenes to get
Right,
there. You know what I mean?
exactly.
There's a lot of work
Right.
behind the scenes.
Right. So it should be, we work with you and then you
Yeah.
work with the staff and everybody
Right.
else.
Mhm.
That's
And
right.
we work with the community through the public hearing process. When the
Absolutely.
community comes and talks to us.
Yes,
But we
that's
don't,
right.
that's our engagement with the community.
Well, and
So
we
I-
all do that public session where people come to the table and we hear
Right.
from them. So there's ways that we're doing it.
Right.
So I don't want to bind ourselves in a particular way, but it's definitely as part of the planning, you know.
So you would take out that sentence there? This Board of Ed will work in consultation with certified and uncertified staff?
Yeah, I would say that the Board of Ed works with the
With the
superintendent.
superintendent,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't really work with the staff. That's not our job. That's your job.
No, they come and present and,
Right.
share with you, but,
right, which circles back to the ad hoc budget procedures committee's draft, where we had a sentence that said that, with the superintendent, in conjunction with the superintendent.
Yeah.
And
so we
business-
might have to wordsmith that a little bit.
Yeah, so that.
And then
that-
the way we do it, even Irene discussed a way that could be really, I think, really exciting, where you have representatives from the board and the council, you have the mayor and the chair, you have, the town manager and the superintendent, and you start earlier to
But
talk
that's
about
not,
some of
but
these
that's not,
priorities.
that's not our policy. That's a different discussion, Susan. That's not
Okay.
about the policy. I tried to present what I understood Ian to have said, but I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask, the answers to which might be helpful to us. So how did the ad hoc committee envision the process of student, staff, parent, guardian participation? It's one question. I'll read the questions and then cover what we want. There was talking about assessment metrics. What assessment metrics was the ad hoc committee referring to? Who's to evaluate and define them? How do we avoid staff overload? Third one, what types of outcomes did the ad hoc committee have in mind? I'm sure
could-
it had some.
Slow down there, Matt, and just handle them one by one.
I'm sorry. You want me to? Okay, I'll just go to the first. You're right. Thank you. So in your original, these are my questions towards the original text.
Right.
How did the ad hoc committee envision the process of student, staff, parent, guardian participation?
We didn't go into great detail about that. That was mostly reflective of the conversation across the broader board, where a lot of the board members have already made inquiries to see more raw responses and more detailed data. So basically it was just in spirit of like, anticipating that we would get that kind of information to the board as a general, practice, moving forward, that stuff would be available for us to use as reference points.
What about the line, the board will work in consultation with certified, non-certified, and administrative staff, students, and you had caregivers, and I think we meant parents, guardians. So am I understanding you to say that there was no intention, or that there was or wasn't any intention of engaging with all these stakeholders?
Well, the certified, non-certified staff, that's black ink. And yeah, I mean, that could be refined to just go through the, the existing data. I mean, I don't think we need to create a special thing. And also public hearing.
Okay,
I think we should take that
Can I just
sentence
tell
out.
you can I tell you the timeline of our work is that every year annually we get those assessment data and we are bringing it forth the months prior to the budget. So you really have all of that. I don't think we need to go over it again during a budget process. There's way too much to do. So you
Right.
have
So
that
my
information
point
already.
Was that we would be coming to the table with that already in hand.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah, you
already
will.
have it sort of like integrated into our mindset.
Yeah, you will. And I think our timeline is really conducive to that, the way we've laid it out over the years that I've been here. So I do believe that that's important.
so then the business about having surveys of students, staff, and guardians. I love the idea of surveys, but God knows they take a lot of time and
Mhm.
staff.
They do a lot of them.
Right.
But we do have that too. We do have
we
those
already-
surveys.
We
So
already have the surveys.
yeah, we've had
Okay.
them.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what was the intent of that sentence was, collection and review. So we already do
Yeah.
the collecting. But we just need to refine the review process, to some extent to satisfy the current board.
It almost is using the data, the current data, we're able to prioritize, similar to what happened last year when we knew we had to shift to the science of reading. And it was the board that came up with, I think it was Adrian, who said, we need funds if we're going to have a new program. We don't have funds in the budget. But he knew that because he had been on that curriculum committee and he was very invested in it. So that's kind of an example of how we take the data and the legislation and all that, and then we might have to add to the budget because of it.
So I have two more questions.
Mhm.
And this is primarily to Jen and Ian. In the period between your formulation of your draft and now, have you any additional thoughts or guidance that administration of the policy committee should consider?
Hold on one second. Yeah. Could you say that question again?
Sure. In the period between, I don't know when you finished the document before I saw it, but in the period between when you all met the last time and now, have either of you, and I'll ask Mike when I see him too, have any additional thoughts or guidance that would help the policy committee and the administration in our joint reflection?
I can't say particularly off the top of my head. I mean, that's kind of a really wide open question.
It is.
Basically, I would just, we do need administration interaction and suggestions to work collaboratively.
Mm-hmm. And I
So
think
let me-
because of the process, Matthew, that's going to be kind of innate and inherent, because when we're putting this and crafting this together after even this conversation, we can look at it again, or we can bring it to the board and have the whole board look at it again, and then be able, some of that might come out if there's other things that we haven't considered, or if there's things in it that they, want to talk about.
I can't see Jen on my screen. Are you still with us, Jen?
I'm here, Matthew.
Would you care to jump in as well? I'd really love to hear what you had to say as well.
Well, there were a couple of suggestions I wanted to make on the revised policy. I know I made it when Ian and Mike and I were together. And so like in that second paragraph, right prior to the budget's development, the Board of Ed shall study the school operations in relations to past, present, and future needs. Um, I wanted to remove past, present, and future, and just in relation to needs of students, because I'm assuming that as you're considering something, like you don't need to specifically say all that. Also,
But that is part of the process, Jen, that when we're studying, and Irene's doing a fabulous job really looking at the numbers that are actual versus what has been predicted, and if we've actually put enough money in the budget. So that's part of the process anyway, in the
Right.
beginning, and it is important. But I like the fact that you're talking about related to the needs of students, because that
Mhm.
can change. It can be based on data, like what's happening with those special ed children. Do we need more resources? That kind of thing.
okay, so that was just like I thought it was too wordy myself. But if you want to leave it, I was indifferent. As you could see, like in our draft, we had left it in there.
And when Irene and I work with the team, and try to do a regulation, we'll make sure we capture that essence of looking at historical
Mm.
operating, and actuals, so that we can really fine tune to make sure that we're adequately funding the budget.
Okay. And then I should have mentioned this one first. It was in the first paragraph. Last sentence, or I guess that's the only sentence. Governing preparation, timeliness, and available appeal procedure of any reductions. We're assuming a negative.
Right.
Available appeal procedure, like maybe remove of any reductions, procedure by, I don't know, by town council, doesn't make sense if we remove of any reductions. So looking for policy, committee to, just don't assume that it's a reduction in the negative, why there's an appeal, because we could appeal a lot of other stuff during the budget
Well,
planning
you could
process.
appeal to make it more like what was
Right.
tried to do last year, right?
So
So you
Yeah.
could do it either way.
the way to achieve that is just to say any adjustments.
Yeah, I would
By
say
town
that
council.
instead of
Very good.
reductions, or,
Right.
yeah, adjustments, any adjustments. That's good.
Thank you.
Where do you see that, Susan?
It's in that
I'm
first paragraph. It was actually
Ian's,
through the CABE policy.
The one that's
Uh,
being presented on screen, Beverly, I believe it's Matthew's version.
okay,
He
it's in
took
the
the
first
CABE.
paragraph. Okay, I see it. I see it. Okay. Because I got three things going on here. I got Cabe, Ian's, and
I
Matthew.
know, it's hard to keep track of.
Yeah, no.
I
And
would have
then,
gotten that to you sooner had I pulled
Oh,
that
that's okay.
sooner.
That's okay.
So I have an idea, and you all can say it's wonderful or shoot it down. If I were to correct my spelling errors and have statutes instead of statues, adjustments, add the supplemental appropriation, add the federal, and send that over to Ian. Ian has got his original text. He has the budget. He has the benefit of all of our conversation, and have him have another whack at it. And I think we'd probably be ready to go and pass it.
I'd be open to
Well-
that.
Yeah.
I'd like to chance to take all the notes from this meeting, since we weren't able to do it like, live editing, due to the, two different documents, and also the CABE document not being at hand. But yeah, I would like the opportunity to try to re-edit all this stuff together, plus with the verbal, conversation we've had.
And Ian, if you want to take those procedural things and just say procedural things to consider, put that down so that we can look at it, when we try to form those regulations and then bring it back
Mhm.
for you guys to look at.
Can you send that to everybody and not just Ian Matthew? Because
I
I
would be
like to
happy
see
to
it
do that.
also.
I will be happy to do that.
And the other
Great.
thing I would caution is in the third paragraph, just because these are public documents people can see, where we indicate that we'll provide the collection and review of assessment data.
Yeah, we
We-
don't want to put that.
We need to, if we're going to do that, we still need to make sure that we redact out the specific student information. As Lauren was presenting last night, that's not something that we can provide. So,
But see, I don't think the
Right.
procedure should provide that. I think that
Oh.
that the
Right.
process is that the board is privy to all that data prior
Exactly.
to the budget process and can consider the data that's available
right,
in prioritizing the needs of the
right.
district.
I agree, Susan. I just want to make sure that we make it very
Yeah, I don't,
clear that
that's, yeah.
So would you be
But it- Sorry.
content, Irene, if after the word data, we put in a parenthetical phrase, redacted of all
No, you don't
privacy?
need to get into all of that, Matthew.
Yeah, listen,
think-
I know this has come up a number of times, and I think it should just be assumed and understood that we're never going to release private or identifying information. The whole idea of this data collection is to anonymize it, first and foremost. We just want the stats, not.
Well, you get the
I
stats
mean,
prior,
that's
so you're
been
using
a
the
lot.
information that you've received in determining priorities for the budget.
Right, and I can
I mean, that's what's really happening here.
So that it says that more clearly, that we'll be using whatever the current data is that we have,
Right.
or that
I
has been
like that.
put to the
That
board.
sounds better. Why don't
Yeah,
we put it that way?
I really just want to put a big disclaimer across all these conversations that the board is I don't want to speak for the board, but I believe that we've all discussed it in a number of ways, that we do understand that all privacy concerns must be taken into
Yeah.
account anytime that we review survey results.
Well, and
exactly. And
any student data, right?
And that was simply my point is I have in my prior life had situations where people have looked at a policy and made an assumption because it didn't indicate that it would not include the information. They assumed that the, information was being provided. So that's why I just wanted to make sure that, anything like that is protected information, that it stays protected and somehow we include that here.
Right,
Yeah, right. I agree with you, Irene, that we should make sure that it's protected and
Right.
included in this
So
policy.
Irene, what would you think after Ian has another whack at it? Before we bring it back to us, you take a look at it and see if that item passes muster with you.
No, I agree, but I also want to see if it passes muster with Floyd. Just to
So
make
everything we do is gonna go to Floyd.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That'll be an extra set of
thing.
eyes.
Just because
Where-
I've seen
where
I've seen good
revised
intentions
Senate
taken out of context before, so that's why
Right.
I'd like to ensure that the board's good intention is put right in the policy so that if anybody looks at it online, they understand that, they're.
And
Yeah.
I think that
And that's well understood and duly noted, and I will take that into account, and that's why I'm saying, like, I would like to take this back and revise it again,
okay,
considering all these notes.
that sounds great. It's just more work for you, Ian.
Yeah. And I think it should come back to policy first before we move it forward to the entire board to make sure that it's
Absolutely.
okay.
Well, and the
Yeah, I
other
don't-
thing we could do is we could also just have like a blanket policy that we create a new one that just says, like, anytime any data is discussed, it is going to be properly anonymized and redacted to respect all privacy concerns. Like, have something just like understood, like that is
Right, standard
Not-
language.
right. Like that it should be a broad umbrella understanding that we
Mhm.
all got that,
Right,
and don't need to, like, put it into every little policy. Just have it as a policy that, like policy 000, this is what we do, and we're not going to try to betray anyone's confidence.
So where do we stand on policy 3110? Are we using Matthews? Are you using Matthews, Ian, and tweaking Matthews?
I'm
Or
gonna
what are we
take-
doing here?
I'm gonna use Matthews and the committee's draft and fuse them together based, and also incorporate all the notes in this meeting. I'll refer to this recording and go through it and like, and take out like what everyone's saying and try to accommodate for it.
Okay,
And
because
then
I thought that's what
it'll come
Matthew
back
did.
to us at our next, it'll come back to us at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
and don't forget to add the supplemental appropriations.
No, no,
to
I
it.
promise to do that. I promise to do that.
Okay,
It would help if you also send it back to Erica so that she has it as well. Because she's
Okay.
good at just making sure everything's in place the way it needs to
So
be.
Erica, Mike, Jen, and this committee, and Susan.
and
And
Irene,
Irene.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry, Matt, you were saying like I should send it all to them, like to everyone that you just listed?
Well, I will send you my stuff, and after you've done it, you want to just give me a call and we can talk on the phone, and I'll give you my Hexure and you can send it to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
So the time now is 7:21. Shall we send out for Chinese or do you want to go home? Do you want to continue? I'm willing to, but I don't want to presume anything. What's your pleasure?
I'm willing to continue up until 8 o'clock, and that's it for me. Because last night we were there to after 10, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was too much.
So
And then we have
Beverly, I
another
put it
meeting
this way.
tomorrow.
Beverly, I always say this, I need my beauty sleep.
Yeah. There's so much sitting I can do. So when you
there's-
don't hear that, I'm walking around. If I don't say I second
Okay.
that motion, I'm not at my iPad. I'm walking around. All
So
right, but I'm
Ian-
willing to do it to 8 o'clock, and that's my time limit.
Susan, can you tolerate
Yeah.
anymore?
I
Um,
can.
well-
Irene, are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
So
Jen?
it looks like we've got 3113 next, right?
Well, I was going
well,
to ask,
so, I'll float this out there as a consideration. You know, looking at the number of CABE policies, I mean, 3113 is not duplicated by CABE. Is that correct, Matthew?
I did not see a CABE piece. If there is one, I'm not aware of it.
I'm just,
And
Yeah, there is. There's one.
From CABE on
There's a
3113?
piece. Yes, there is. 3313.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
it's
let me-
3113.
Oh, no. I don't see any for 31113. No.
uh,
My bad.
So
I'm just
we
double
could just
checking
have
while you're
Floyd look at
discussing.
it for us then, if we wanted.
so, Matthew, could you take your document down? I'm gonna share 3113.
Sure.
And then, so I would propose that we look at 3113, because that's the one thing that's not duplicated by CABE. And then maybe at that point, what we could do is, I could take all the CABE
Thank you.
documents and, take all the drafts from the committee and do some more work on those, and then bring them back before the policy.
There is a CABE 3113 that was sent out this afternoon.
Mhm.
That's why I didn't get it.
That was in the packet that I believe Joyce sent out.
I'm not.
I didn't,
Yeah,
I got a package yesterday. I had nothing in that packet for that.
Oh, it was something that was provided to Jake because we were just following the chain of communication. So there is a 3113 CABE policy. So there's basically a
Yeah,
CABE
I see it now.
policy.
I
Was
see
it
it
sent
now.
by email? Was it sent by email?
Yeah, it was in our packet that I emailed to you.
Okay, I didn't get to review that today. I'm sorry.
It's not big. It just,
So-
I'll just read it to you. It says, before
Oh,
adopting the budget, the
Oh.
Board of Education shall study the school program in relation to present and future needs of the students and community, and establish budget priorities for the fiscal year. To make the budget a comprehensive reflection of the financial needs of the school program, steps shall be taken to involve the certified, non-certified, and administrative staff in development. And that's really what we do, because we do zero budget planning. And they start out the process. They're doing it. The paperwork goes out Friday and they're going to start. So that's really, and then I think there was something that talked about prioritizing in that last budget.
Thank you, Wayne.
So
All right, so,
establishing budget priorities.
well, you know, I think that there's a lot of a flurry of last minute things being sent out here. I mean, I sent this report out over a week or so, 2 weeks ago. So,
Within a half an hour.
you know, I would like to just have some more time with the CAVE documents. I kind of got the gist of the administration's input there as far as looking at like adhere more towards just policy and veer away from regulation speak. And you know, merging
And simple, not so complicated. You know, simple to me is better because then everybody understands it. If you make it too wordy, then you start losing people. It becomes more complicated.
right, but there's also
So-
some things that we do need to understand because in some of the previous policies that it was not wordy enough in the sense that it didn't talk about establishing a timeline that was in conjunction with the Board of Ed.
But see, I think that's a good thing to put in regulations though.
Right.
Those are
Exactly.
the
And
things we want to make sure so you could almost shift some of the things you're saying in here in the green to a regulation to take a look
Do
at.
an R3113?
Yeah,
Okay,
just in,
not that the board is really having to do that, but that at least will give us a head start.
right. Well, I mean, we've edited our documents in this policy committee before.
Yeah, yeah, we've
And-
looked at it. Absolutely. I always like your input.
Thank you. So yeah, you know, I just think, you know, the intent is clear, I believe, and also, you know, based on the number of meetings that we've had that we've discussed the timeline, you know, the will of the board seems to be, the consensus seems to be that we do want input on that timeline and
Yeah.
it's a negotiated thing between the administration and the board. So
Right.
that's all I was trying to capture with this language
Yep,
here.
I
And
get it.
it makes more sense to put the procedure type, more procedural aspects into an R document that goes alongside
Yep.
the P document. That
Yeah.
makes sense. I could do that.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to have the opportunity to do that if that's the goal, and that's a major fundamental shift. And I understand that and I appreciate it, and I think it is. I agree that, you know, regulation should be separated from policy. But I also think the board does have a place in guiding that regulation.
right. Agreed.
Right.
And that's so-
Susan, can you write a regulation for this policy too? And let's see how your regulation and Ian's
I'd
comes together.
probably just start with what Ian has and just talk about what other things, if there's other things or any suggestions, like I know that sometimes on the timeline, like we talk about the last summer months, that's the closeout, the audit, the everything. So we really can't start on next year's budget. Certainly there'll be things that can inform next year's budget in that audit process and in that review of finalizing a budget and starting the new one. And then we're thinking of a third one. So in those last summer months, I've just seen this district for 10 years and they are on speed dial as
Yeah.
far as getting things accomplished.
And,
So I
and
just know
Okay.
what they can do and what they can't do. So I would just say that it's got to start in the fall, not in the summer. But
Okay.
other than that, I think we were pretty neck and neck with most of the dates. And we actually, Irene and I actually looked at the calendar to make sure that the vacation times weren't on there. And then to try to think about what you all had said, to try to get a day or 2 days in January and a couple days each week in February.
Mhm.
So we've kind of laid that out, but we want to review it with you once we've like looked at Ian's. Ian was going to also try to capture some of the notes from
Right.
last night. So we
Yep.
wanted to do
Okay.
that.
And actually I did
All right.
that this
Let
afternoon.
Bev go. Let Bev go. It's Bev's turn still. Bev's turn still.
Oh, yep. All right.
And in the regulation, we can actually indicate something similar to what they have in charter as far as that language, that, you know, the budget timeline would be presented to BOE beginning the first week of September and be adopted by September 30th. I mean, the budget timeline kicks off everything.
Right.
Susan, do you
Something
need
that we can-
I'm sorry, Irene, go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just saying that is something that we could put in the regulation And that way, if we find that it's not working, or do we need to move it to August so we adopt it sooner? That becomes that flexibility that we can adjust when it comes into
Regulation.
the
instead of
regulation
policy.
itself. The how to.
I have a substantive, different perspective than Ian on some of this. And I say this with great respect because I recognize what he's contributed to this. With regard to the concept of an ad hoc budget priorities and procedures committee, I personally find that problematic. I like the idea of the board being more engaged than it has been perhaps in the past to get involved in budget priorities and procedures, comma, but I would substitute the word may for shall. That's in the second paragraph, first line. In my, it says, in your language, this committee shall draft a report of recommendations. I would say may draft recommendation because we cannot presume, this board will be different in 15 months. There will be new faces on this board. The tenor of the board may be more activist or less activist. We just certainly can't say. I do not want to bind the board by saying, may we clearly communicate our desire, but we don't legally bind them to a course of action that they might not want to follow. The second thing is I'm concerned about having an ad hoc committee of 3. I know it's not the committee's intent to be non-democratic. I understand that clearly, but a 9-person board is small enough. And I think 9 people bring more perspective than 3. I think it's wiser to encourage this proposed subcommittee's function to be assigned to the full board and make this a mandatory cow topic at a particular time. Let us cement the process of budget priorities and procedures into our cycle, but let's make it a full board process.
And can I add to that, Matthew? Because in the past, the Finance and Facilities Committee has taken on that kind of role as far as overseeing budget, all things budget throughout the year. The one we're on, the one we were on, the one we're going to be on. So I think that that's been a practice of the board. And I just want to add that I did like Irene's idea of getting the council together with board subgroup to just have those conversations. And Beverly, you might want to speak to this because I know you.
Well, if I just want to chime
Yeah,
in.
I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of not even having an ad hoc budget committee. And like Matthew said, the full board. And I like Irene's suggestion about getting together beforehand with the town council, a couple of people from the town council, the mayor, the superintendent, and let's work together beforehand. I'm in favor of that. I'm not in favor of the ad hoc budget committee.
Well, I just want to say this, that, you know, one, we've had a finance facilities committee for quite some time, and, you know, we've gotten where we've gotten. So I put this in here just as a way to try to formalize it. And, you know, the budget is, I mean, this policy existed before our committee, and I just added 2.
Yeah.
The whole idea was that the subcommittee would create a report that then would go to the whole board to consider. Now, if that needs to be clarified, then it shall. I like the idea of including other people from other bodies. That could easily be integrated into this as well. The whole idea is to have a formalized process that kind of closes out one budget, you know, in the spring, and then opens up another budget in the fall. And, you know, it would be specific to the budget procedure and process. Finance and facilities tends to handle a lot of other things as well. So, you know, I didn't want to bog them down. I could appreciate Matthew's comments about having it as a full board operation. That could also be adjusted in the language as opposed to forming like a subcommittee. But
Just
again, like, you know, we do end up with a lot of outstanding agenda items. So, you know, the idea of a subcommittee that can kind of like process a lot of the raw information and then try to present it to the
Mhm.
board in a streamlined fashion, similar to what we're doing now, where we're gonna be more targeted. That was the intent.
Well, I can certainly appreciate the perspective. I think that the difference here is that if we're giving priorities, that is central to the board's function as a board. And for that reason, the board should be involved. There's just a richness of
Right.
conversation that your committee had that I wasn't a party to. And there's no
Right.
criticism in that whatsoever. But having a committee do it deprives the other board members of participating in that rich conversation.
And may I add, Matthew, that the board's main function is policy and budget. And that's why I agree with Matthew that the whole board should be involved in that. And if it's a priority of the board, make sure it's on the agenda. We have to make sure the chair puts it on the agenda that we're
Right.
talking
So-
about budget.
So those are all good suggestions for an edit here, and I'll make note of that, and I think that, you know, that's a good direction to go. Just historically, it has not happened.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we
so,
have to change that now.
exactly, so
Historically, it may not happen, so let's change it, but
We're
let's
having that
change it with the
conversation.
whole board.
that's fine, that's a good note to take, and I will take that into consideration and work it
Oh,
into the new
that's
edit.
crooked
One
lane.
one last,
Can
one
I,
last
oh,
thing.
can I
Go ahead,
jump
Jen,
in?
please.
Oh. I like that idea of like the whole board and making it like one meeting that's dedicated to setting the priorities for the future. I think that's good. I'm not sure. I'm on the finance committee. I'm not sure. Maybe we failed somewhere along the process here. So if yeah, so I'm okay with like the entire board and us making it part of the committee, like a committee of the whole meeting. I know everyone's excited about collaboration with town council, RTM, and Board of Ed. And that is a great idea, but I don't want to make it into policy right now. Right now, as like Matthew mentioned, you know, like the composition of the board is going to change in time. Composition of administration is going to change. We don't want to be in a situation like we're a pretty strong board. You know, we're very, we speak our mind. We're very forthright, and we have conviction. And I feel like everyone who's on the board wants to do what's right for the kids. We are not sure what each individual agenda item is of future boards or the composition of town council and RTM in the future, or even administration. Last thing I want is for a policy to say, yep, we will meet with town council, RTM collaboration. And it is our duty as the board to set the budget. I don't want these meetings to be like, hey, superintendent, you need to come in at 0, right? And these meetings, and then sort of like getting our hands tied. So yes, let's meet. Let's do it, but don't make it like an official item on this policy that we're going to be meeting with all of these bodies. That's just my opinion.
And that's a good point. That's a good point, Jen. That's a
You
good
have a
point.
good point, Jen. Thank you.
I'd like to build on that too. This is my opinion, Susan, nobody else's. I personally believe that we need to give direction to administration rather than simply guidance. At the same time, we need to be humble enough to recognize that in large measure, it's the superintendent's experience that guides us. Not just this superintendent, but there's a superintendent who's going to come in 3 years, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years.
I'm not going to make it to 10.
Okay, finding the balance.
I'm just teasing, but I hope I make it.
Finding the balance. Finding the balance between directing the superintendent regarding educational priorities and then letting him or her bring the professional plan back to us for discussion and hopefully approval is the board's challenge. With Susan at a point in her career that her retirement and our need to do succession planning in the next few years means that we must be mindful of creating a board superintendent climate that will attract the very best candidates.
Right.
We want to give more direction. We do not want to tie her hands. That's my opinion from 10,000 feet.
You reading that, Matthew?
I spent an hour on that paragraph.
Wow. And it's very much
You
like the
prepared
kid
a
policy.
statement.
If I could just jump back in and I just want to respond a little bit here. I mean, we do need to keep everything in context. And I mean, the whole reason why this all came to pass is because, you know, it wasn't just this last budget cycle, although it was the new board that experienced it and took the initiative to make this, you know, committee and seek to change things. I mean, for a number of years now, the community has not been happy with the way the budget has been handled by the Board of Ed, as far as just like deliberating and coming up with it and the, you know, the critical analysis applied to it. So I mean,
Ian,
we're
I
not
have
here-
to say, I disagree with that. I never heard anybody in the community saying anything like that. So
I
maybe you
respectfully
did with the
disagree
crap.
as well.
Well, okay, well, I ran for a reason.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, you ran for a reason with the people that you're speaking to, but I never heard that. In all my years, I never heard that.
at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of people that, you know, the RTM wasn't happy this time around. The town council wasn't happy this time around. You know, and they were, you know, very open with that.
But you know
Yeah.
what? The town council's hardly ever happy sometimes. So that's
So,
like a
okay, thank you.
given.
You know, I just want to, you know, try to pull it back on track here as far as like looking at, you know, suggested edits and ways that we can move forward with these reformations. I appreciate Jen's comments, and I think that is definitely something that should be taken to heart. It should not be enshrined in policy. And in fact, you know, if we look at the budget timeline or just like, you know, call back to that, you know, the joint sessions that we have with the Board of Ed, with the town council and the RTM, those are also opportunities that could turn into a work session. Now, historically, they have not really been too much conversation between the bodies, but that's already a thing that's in practice in the town. It's just how we choose to utilize that time when we're in those meetings. Like last time around, we only had the public hearing and the meeting was adjourned before the bodies had a chance to interact with each other. So, you know, we have ways we could address, you know, getting input from the RTM and the town council that doesn't involve, you know, building a policy around it. I think it is a significant concern that we know we are the Board of Ed. It is our responsibility to handle the budget. I appreciate Bev's comments that, you know, we handle policy and we handle budget. And, you know, but policy is a driver of procedure, which is then a driver of regulation of that procedure. So, you know, there is a bit of a pyramid structure there. And we need to keep that in mind. I also want to be mindful of the time. And again, like, you know, I think this conversation has been incredibly instructive. And you know, I would suggest that perhaps, you know, we could table all these until the next policy committee meeting. And I could take Dave documents and all the comments and, you know, have another go at these.
And you could take some of this language, though, that you want to see as process and just call it regulation, and then we can kind of fine tune that.
I've got that right here, you know, P's and
Yeah.
R's.
Yeah.
I'm not minding P's and Q's, I'm minding P's and R's. So, you know, and you know, I've been steeped in these
I
documents. for
know
quite
you've really worked hard on this, Ian. The whole committee has.
And,
It's obvious.
some-
So
A
Yeah.
lot of work.
Ian, more,
So I
more
think
so.
that we've got our marching orders. The marching orders is I've got a responsibility to get something to Ian. Ian's going to put it together so we're ready to go on that first policy. If you folks want, we could see if we could pick a second date in November. It all depends what you all want to do. I'm willing to meet a second time in November if you want. Our next meeting is the 12th. We would like to get
I'm actually at Department of Defense Education Activity for my annual meeting that I always go to. That's why I keep getting these grants. So I'm not going to be in town on the 12th, but maybe we can work around my schedule and find another date if that's
Okay.
possible.
Maybe we can talk and see if, would you guys be interested in meeting twice in November if Susan's schedule allowed it?
Yes.
I didn't hear
What would
you.
the dates? What would the dates be? Because November is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And usually I go away. So
I don't
guess
know. I'll have to speak with Susan. We'll have to speak with
Okay.
Susan tomorrow. Are you gonna be in tomorrow to
Okay.
talk, Susan?
We don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
to commit to a firm date right now. We just confirm, if we confirm interest and willingness to try,
Mhm.
Okay,
every good
we'll
attempt.
try to come up with a couple of dates and see if anybody bites.
Right.
Okay, so if in the little bit of time we have left, Bev had asked a couple of weeks ago, I'm segueing away from the budget. Bev had asked a couple of weeks ago if we could look at homeschooling. We're not going to look at it tonight because there is no text. But what I hoped we could do, and Bev, if I'm going the wrong way, just straighten me out. I thought what we could do is look at where we are and see if there's anything that we think we ought to revisit.
Mhm.
There have been some requests that I don't think we can meet and some that we can potentially meet. So Bev, would you like to add anything to just what you'd like to talk about when we get it on the agenda?
No, this wasn't my referral. This was your referral, Matthew.
It was my
I
referral,
just-
but you wanted to
but
get it
I
off,
just-
move it along.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
This is not my
So
referral.
Erica did look for us. So she's got some CABE policy, our policy, and East Lyme and a couple others. So we could look at a few of them. And they're all in that packet that I sent you electronically.
Okay, so with regard cell phones, I think we've reached consensus that we have the handbooks have been amended. The adjustments are in force. They do not handshake with the policy.
No,
And
but
so-
they're a regulation, so they're really in practice. The
But
only
we
thing
can-
that the policy says that the regulation is stricter on is it says that it can be dependent on teacher. What it
Yes.
really is student needs, because there might be an EL student that actually needs a device for communication. So I'm more
That's-
interested in the kids' need than the teacher's need, but
Mhm.
that,
So-
I think that's gonna come down the pipe because we're gonna get legislation, but I do feel pretty good.
We're not going to get
Matthew, about the-
legislation for another year to 2 years, according to both Christine and Heather. I mean, your point was well taken. I needed to look into it. They both said they're waiting for UConn research to be done. It won't be done for at least 14 to 18 months. So I think we should
I
make,
do feel comfortable with the regulations and it's really made a difference, keeping tight with that,
well,
so with the handbook.
what is the objection to making them handshake? Because I could see somebody complaining that that's not what your policy says. It's not what your policy says. What you're doing is in violation of your policy.
Well, I think we need to go back to it, but let's get through the budget stuff first. Don't you think?
Okay.
Because we've got the regulations
You
working
think we
right
can,
now.
you think, when do you think would be comfortable for you to have it ready? An updated policy?
After we get through this budget stuff. I think these are a priority for us because we're getting ready to enter into that season.
Oh, I
Right, I'm
concur.
in favor of prioritizing the budget stuff and, cell phone stuff, we are waiting for further information from the state. We had a conversation about this last month where we had like a 1, 2, 3 action plan of one, following through as the superintendent indicated, like just enforcing the policies that we do have consistently across all schools in the district.
Mhm.
And then 2, making sure that having Erica like draft up an adjustment to the policy so it matches what's in the handbooks.
But
Those are-
that's precisely what I was asking, is when we
Right.
might have Erica do that.
Yeah.
Right,
Is
so
that hard to do, Susan, that you can't do that? Look at the
No, it's
handbook.
not that hard. It's just that, if I'm working with Erica and getting some of these documents, it's just a lot. And she also reports to Anne Marie. So I was just gonna try to do one thing at a time, not to confuse it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I
I
mean, I
forgot
can
that she
get to
works
it
part-
as soon as we get through this.
Mhm.
But-
All right. Well, I'm in favor of waiting. I
Okay.
don't want to.
I'm not
Make
saying we're gonna have to
undue
wait
work.
that long, but let's get through November with this and then we can
Okay.
tackle it.
Fair
All
enough.
right. In December, we'll put it on the agenda for
We could
policy
do
then.
that. Yep, that's a good thing.
Terrific.
So
Is there
I'm
anything
looking
else
at,
before we go? I'm sorry, Susan. Go ahead.
I'm just looking at November.
Let me get my calendar.
The week of November 4th is kind of busy, but we do have a Board of Ed special meeting.
Right on the 7th.
What
What
day
about
is it?
November 14th? Can you do that, Susan?
No, that's that same week that I'm at Dodea. I'm out there
Oh.
for 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
What about November 19th?
I could do, I'm just looking at, we've got a couple special meetings in the week of the 4th. Do you know why we have a Thursday, the 7th special meeting?
Yeah, that's the health insurance.
Oh, okay.
Is that a board meeting or a committee meeting?
So there's 2 board
That's a
meetings. the
board
week of the
meeting.
4th. I don't know, the 19th looks pretty good. I don't know if we're gonna have 2 COWs in November, the 11th and the 18th, and then the regular meeting's the 25th. But
So you could
the
do the
19th we could do,
Okay.
if that works
Is
for
that-
you all.
It's on my calendar.
That works for me.
Yeah, I should be good with that.
Terrific.
And Ian, Erica can help you if you just help me orient her on, what you want to highlight that goes to regulation and what you want to keep.
Sure, I'll send
And
out.
then,
I'm gonna go
so
through this.
she can get the CABE
take
too
note.
and outline it to help you,
Right.
so you don't have that much work to do.
Right. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll do that. for this
Okay,
next
thank you.
phase. Thank you.
Very good work. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Jen, for coming and spending another lovely night with us.
Of course.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you all for all your work.
Make a
Sweet
motion
dreams,
to
everybody.
adjourn. Do we have to adjourn or
second.
Oh,
what?
yeah, I think you gotta adjourn.
Okay, so Deb has made a motion. I'll second it. All those in favor of
Night.
adjourning,
I'm in
please
favor.
indicate by saying aye.
I.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 7:53 PM on the 16th.
Good job.